Welcome to Statutes and Stethoscopes, where million-dollar verdicts are won or lost on medical evidence and where the chart never lies. We take you inside the high-stakes world where medicine meets justice. From forensic pathologists who read death like a story, to trial attorneys who turn complex medical records into courtroom victories. These are the voices that matter when everything is on the line. Discover how expert witnesses survive cross-examination, uncover red flags in nursing home records, and learn why the right medical insight can change everything. This is Justice in Action, where every case could be someone's last chance for truth. Here's your host, Tracy Liberatore.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Statutes and Stethoscopes. I'm your host, Tracy Liberatore. My guest today is a personal injury lawyer who, prior to pursuing a law degree, spent 11 years as a registered nurse, working mostly in the intensive care unit at Geisinger, Wyoming Valley Medical Center in Pennsylvania. This medical experience has given him an understanding of the devastating impact of vehicle collisions, workplace accidents, and other injuries caused by someone else's negligence. His practice areas are personal injury, product liability, social security disability, workers' comp, bad faith, premises liability, and truck collisions. He, interestingly enough, had also met his wife Carmen when they were in nursing school, and they've been married for 11 years. Carmen still works as a nurse doing medical case review. They have 2 children, Lillian and Levi, ages 9 and 7. When he's not fighting for his clients, his best interests, his activities that he likes to do is watch his little ones in gymnastics, karate, and soccer. With that, everybody, meet my guest today, Josh Perry. Welcome to Statutes and Stethoscopes, Josh.
Thanks, Tracy. One thing to add, my kids seem to latch on to new sports every week. So my son is doing football now. My daughter is doing some softball, and my son played baseball this spring too. So they like to pile on the sports onto the plate.
Absolutely. Kids always keep you busy for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So today's episode is packed with eye-opening insights that you definitely won't want to miss. We're diving into what Josh, as a seasoned attorney, wishes he knew back when he was a nurse and how those lessons could change the game for medical professionals. If you're a provider looking to step into the world of expert witness work, you'll definitely want to hear his insider tips. We're also going to be pulling back the curtain on car insurance. Yes, from an attorney's perspective. So let's just say there's a few things that your agent won't tell you that you're probably going to want to hear. So, Josh, did you have any experience as a nurse that intrigued you and caused you to want to get into the law? Any challenges that you met along the way that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So in that regard, working as a bedside nurse, there's kind of a limited amount of opportunities for advancement within the nursing field, specifically at the bedside. So, after spending quite a few years at the bedside, I started to look at other opportunities for advancement within my career. And the difficult thing is to remain at the bedside. There's not really any more advanced roles as a registered nurse. So, there's some specialty roles in the sense that you could go into like wound care or work as a PIC nurse and like have kind of a designated specialty. But, really beyond that, there's not much bedside growth. So looking outside of the bedside, a lot of typical avenues for nurses, they look at going into nurse practitioner school or anesthesia school, or kind of those avenues are the more common ones, but there's also the avenues of looking at expert witness, doing consulting type work. And I looked into working as a legal nurse consultant while I was at the bedside, and I actually took a legal nurse consultant course, which kind of opened my mind to working in the law and sparked that curiosity as to what the legal world had to offer. In doing that, I got to looking at what the requirements were to become a licensed attorney and what it entailed. At some point, I realized that it was something that I could potentially achieve and do. So I had a discussion with my wife because obviously if I was going to be going through law school, it's going to affect my whole family. Thankfully, she was open to the idea and I went for it. And here I am today.
Yeah. And you had an interesting story around your law school experience and the birth of your son. Did you want to share about that?
Yeah, sure. So my son was born prematurely. He was born at 30 weeks, and he spent quite a few days in the NICU at Geisinger, Wyoming Valley. And while he was there, I started studying for the LSATs. So I would be in his NICU room holding him, reading a book on the LSATs and kind of starting the process of studying at that time. It obviously worked out, and I got to spend time with him as well as work on studying for the LSAT exam.
Interesting times, right? For sure. And how about your medical experience? How has that impacted your choice of law, the law that you practice? Or, I think that would kind of set you apart in the field, right? You have this medical experience. You could combine that now with a legal degree.
Absolutely. The benefit of having the medical knowledge moving into the law and using that background to practice law is a huge benefit for me in the sense that most of my clients have been injured in some manner, whether it be in a car crash, a slip and fall, some other way. Understanding what their medical conditions are, what their treatment looks like, what their potential treatment could look like down the road, or where their injury could develop, what other issues could they potentially have. All of that stuff helps to understand personal injury, workers' comp, and Social Security disability too. The benefit of the medical background is in qualifying for Social Security disability. One of the ways you could qualify is if you meet a specific, what's known as a grid listing within the regulations. And those regulations were developed by medical providers. So they're very medical intensive. There's specific medical tests that they look for. There's specific medical criteria that's needed to meet those listings. So to be able to develop arguments and make arguments, it requires a good understanding of the client's medical records, what the specific listings are, and kind of meshing the two together. Having the medical background coming into these fields was of great benefit to me. And that's part of the reason that I really went towards personal injury in workers' comp, Social Security disability, is because those things, I'm able to leverage my prior knowledge and help benefit people with it. It was something that drew me in to these fields.
Absolutely. You can use both degrees to really combine both experiences.
For sure. One other thing to touch on is with injuries, sometimes when clients are treating, they may not be treating with the best provider for their injuries. So, for instance, if a client comes and they're seeing their family doctor and they've been experiencing tingling down one of their arms as a result of a motor vehicle collision where they've had a sore neck from whiplash and they've been diagnosed with whiplash, they're going through PT, but their arm continues to be tingly, they have numbness, kind of decrease in sensation of it, sometimes pain shooting down the arm. A lot, it could have some type of nerve involvement. There could be, nerve root trauma causing the tingling and numbness in the arm. So, to be able to make recommendations to the client and help them not only understand and develop their injuries better, but also recover from those injuries and get better treatment is kind of what it's all about. So,
yeah, absolutely. You're still a nurse at heart too, right? And I think too that this medical knowledge probably helps you even in selection of your medical expert. One of the biggest things I see in my other company is attorneys that sort of don't really know what type of expert or specialty they need. I think it would help you with that as well. And so that would lead me to another question. What is it that you, as a medical attorney, look for in a medical expert when you're hiring someone?
Right. So I think that the term itself is kind of self-explanatory. So as a medical expert, you have a specialized knowledge in a specific area or a specific field. And medicine in and of itself is a very specific body of knowledge, but then there's so many different body parts and body systems involved that it's important to ensure that whatever the injury be, you have the right expert to speak to the body system or the body organ that's involved in the injury. So, if you have something that involves musculoskeletal and you have a family practice provider speaking to it, they're not going to be as detailed as an orthopedic or a physiologist on kind of what the injuries are, how they affect the musculoskeletal system, and what treatment might be needed down the road. To understand those specialized bodies of knowledge and where they intersect and where they divide is important to help determining which one would be best to give an opinion on the specific injuries at hand.
Right. And as a nurse looking at a medical record and an attorney, so you've got both perspectives, you could really kind of hone in on what it is you need.
Sure. And just on the medical record perspective too, it's not always just about the injuries. If there's a motor vehicle collision involved that, one party was intoxicated or something like that, being able to find in the medical records where they did a tox screen, where, those things typically lie, and to be able to wade through thousands of pages and be able to locate that specific one, I feel like I've got a distinct advantage that, it's something that somebody may look at the records for 2 hours and not know exactly where it's going to be. And, I could flip through them in less than 5 minutes and find the specific page needed on what's at hand.
Right. You're used to looking at these records as a nurse. Absolutely. So is there anything now that you know as an attorney that you wish you knew before when you were a nurse?
Yeah. So I think one of the main things is, as a nurse, you understand kind of nurse governance and nurse regulation in the sense that, that state regulations for nursing state what your practicability is. Your hospital has the policies on what you could do as a nurse, but just kind of having an overall better understanding of the medical field in the system, that the hospital deals with certain regulations. Field of medicine has quite a few regulations that they're contending with that change from year to year. And a lot of the internal changes within the hospital, a lot of the time, are driven by what these regulations are. And the unfortunate thing is, as a bedside nurse, a lot of the times you see the ill effects of these changes without understanding why they're being made. It typically falls on the hospital administrators from the bedside nurse's perspective that they're making these changes and driving them. But a lot of the times those things are driven by what the regulations currently are and how those regulations change year over year.
I have a lot of the medical experts that work with us that, especially when they're first starting out, come and tell me like, wow, I can't believe how this knowledge or this experience learning the legal stuff has changed my clinical practice. And they're kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the, just kind of the way it's set up, everything is driven by money and funds. So, they're not complying with the regulations, then the hospital's not, they're losing money on it and not, being able to afford the right equipment for their patients. So it's kind of understanding that there's a happy medium that's, trying to be found there a lot of the times, and, thinking of creative ways at the bedside to do the best you can with what you've got sometimes is what you've got to do.
Sure. I think too, with the documentation piece, a lot of people in clinical practice that are just medicine, not knowing the legal piece, don't understand the importance of documentation in a chart. It's just like, oh my God, I got to do all this charting now again or whatever for their notes. I think they get a new perspective of what that means, seeing it from a legal perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And certain things that you think may be important aren't as important, and other things that you don't really think of are really important. So
yeah, absolutely.
It is to spend some time on that piece of it, on documentation. If you're, doing anything, it's nice to be able to document, but anytime that there's anything that's out of the ordinary or not typical, you definitely want to document that. And anytime that, there's a change within your patient or within their status, that stuff you certainly want to document. And anytime you would have any variations from a policy or procedure as well, documenting why that was done, if there was any approval that you had to get prior to varying from that stuff is important as well, because if you're looking at a medical record 2 years after you provided care to a patient, a lot of nurses remember their patient, but the specific intricate details of what went on that day, it's very difficult to remember all of those things. So it's, you want to be able to use the record as, a refresher for yourself as what had occurred and what you did and why you did those types of things. So,
right. So how about for medical people that want to get into this legal work as an expert into the legal community? What kind of advice might you have for somebody trying to do that?
There's definitely ample opportunity. And what there's a couple of recommendations. Is one is realize your specialty and realize what you could provide within that specific specialty. Two is leverage that specialty and that special knowledge and try to identify or locate somebody who is practicing as an expert or a professional in that area to launch your opportunities and your knowledge going forward. If you're looking into getting into legal nurse consulting and you want to start doing expert reports or certificates of merit, what I would recommend is trying to either reach out to an attorney that can put you in contact with a legal nurse consultant or somebody who already works in the field. It would provide you with great benefit in the sense that you would establish contact with somebody who's got experience in the field, bounce ideas off of, that you could ask questions of. They may even send work your way. So if you know a legal nurse consultant that knows you're specialized in critical care and they have a case that involves an issue with a ventilator or a cardiac monitor of some sort that they're not familiar with, they may reach out to you and say, hey, would you mind taking a look at these records and let me know your thoughts on it? Or could you even write a report on these specific items for me? And it, as work comes in and you develop your practice, the more, you get yourself out there, the more work you'll end up pulling in. But, having that mentor is important. And like I had mentioned earlier, I went through a legal nurse consulting program, and the program was absolutely great. It covered a lot of great information. And I think it's a great first step for anybody looking to get into the field. I feel like my biggest fault with it and where I fell flat on my face was in actually moving towards practicing as a legal nurse consultant. I didn't really take any initiative in locating any legal nurse consultants that are out there and establishing contact with them in trying to get work or trying to see if I could work with them, help them out in some manner just to get some experience with it. And most of the times you kind of need to develop some experience prior to jumping off on your own. So it's definitely worthwhile reaching out and establishing contact with somebody who practices and helping to establish yourself.
Well, absolutely. I think that's with any career choice, right? I mean, as a PA or a nurse, we go through our clinical practice and clinical stuff that we have to do for school. So you're watching somebody else do the job, right? And the same thing, I think, for lawyers. I mean, they do internships. So, with this, it's similar. Most of the schools I looked at, they don't necessarily have a program like that set up, but it is certainly, and there's lots of legal nurse consultants out there that you can find them and see if they'll let you work with them, right? Let's shift gears here a little bit. Let's talk about motor vehicle accidents, car insurance. Where do you want to begin?
Sure. So I guess just starting off with the basics. Just the general understanding of what your own auto insurance means, I think could provide you a lot of benefit, in making a determination of what insurance should I buy? What's the best insurance for me? Can I afford better insurance? Those types of things. A lot of the times people figure, I'm not going to be in a car accident, or if I am, I won't be injured. The cheapest insurance I can get. And unfortunately, when you are injured, it leaves you with next to no coverage or potentially no coverage. When you buy auto insurance and there's bodily injury coverage, that coverage isn't intended to protect your injuries. That's intended to protect someone else in the event that you caused the collision. There's additional coverage that is available. It's called uninsured and underinsured, or UM/UIM insurance. The intent of that is if you are injured in a collision and the person that caused the collision either doesn't have enough insurance coverage or has no insurance coverage for the extent of your injuries, your own auto insurance will make up the difference up to the limits of your UIM coverage. And there's another caveat to that on the tort status, but I'll stick with the UIM for a minute here just to provide a little bit better understanding. So just say Joe purchases auto insurance for himself. He purchases what he thinks is a great policy and it has $100,000 of bodily injury coverage, but he doesn't elect any UIM coverage. He gets in a collision with Sandy, who is driving a vehicle that is carrying state minimum coverage, which would be $15,000 of auto insurance. And Joe stands significant injuries where he can no longer work. He needs to have modifications made to his home based off of his injuries. The full amount of insurance coverage available to recover from would be the $15,000 worth of Sandy's auto insurance. And then there's no additional coverage for Joe based off of that auto scenario. So, it would be a very underinsured scenario. Unfortunately, Joe had decent coverage in the event that he caused the collision and somebody else was injured. But for his own injuries, there was really no coverage on his behalf. Taking that same exact scenario, and this time Joe carries uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage for $100,000 in addition to the bodily injury limits of $100,000. Now, when he's injured, he'll be able to recover the $15,000 off of Sandy's insurance, plus potentially the $100,000 of his own uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage for a total amount of $115,000.
Wow, okay, interesting. So bodily insurance doesn't mean it's for you. It's really
correct
for the other person. That's an interesting distinction. Sure. Very important to know.
And one other thing to touch on quickly with it too is your own election of tort status. So there's limited tort and full tort in Pennsylvania. In essence, what that means is depending on the extent of your injuries, you may or may not be able to recover. If you have limited tort coverage, you can't recover for pain and suffering and those types of damages unless you have a substantial impairment of bodily function. So, there's certain things that are required of your injury to be able to make a recovery. If you have limited tort status, those policies are usually cheaper, but you give up that right to potentially recovering based off of the extent of your injuries. Full tort, on the other hand, you would be able to recover for pain and suffering, all of those types of damages for your injuries without exceeding that specific injury threshold. So if you have a soft tissue injury, for instance, say you have whiplash in your neck, it ends up being really severe, causing disruption to your ability to work. You can make a recovery for your whiplash if you have full tort. If you have limited tort, chances are you're not going to be able to make a recovery for the whiplash unless there's certain things that occur, i.e. the need for surgery or some other significant invasive medical procedure that would exceed the limited tort threshold.
And this isn't just like a person gets injured. They can go to their insurance company and the insurance company is going to compensate them, holds them back, even trying to see an attorney like you. It kind of ties your hands as well, right? It's not like they could just try to go and sue somebody if they don't have this in their policy.
Correct. Yeah. And if for whatever reason you did not select UM/UIM coverage or you selected limited tort, there's certain things, or if you don't know what your elections are, it doesn't hurt to speak with an attorney and have them assist you with kind of wading through what your coverages are and if there's potential avenues for recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But these, they can be very restrictive on your ability to recover if you don't carry UM/UIM coverage or you carry limited UM/UIM coverage and you don't carry full tort status, you carry a limited tort. So, there's a lot to consider when purchasing auto insurance. And obviously, with how much insurance has been increasing lately, cost-wise, it's a major concern for everybody. But you really have to consider the potential effects of it and what it could mean to you financially if you do not have the right coverage in place and are involved in an accident that you didn't cause. It can have devastating effects on you.
Okay. Very good information to know. Anything else you think that's important? Touch on this time.
One other thing to consider too with UIM coverage is there's the option to have what's known as stacking. So say for instance, the policy covers all of the vehicles in your house and you've got 3 vehicles. Well, that UIM coverage, if you elect stacking, applies individually to each one of the vehicles. So there, instead of it being $100,000 of coverage, could potentially be $300,000 worth of coverage. If, however, you waive stacking, then that coverage doesn't stack for each vehicle in your house. So you could have 3 vehicles, but you would only have $100,000 of coverage in the policy as well. So that's another caveat that often gets looked at as well on the potential for recovery on it.
Very interesting. All right. I'm going to shift gears again on here. Let's talk about you growing up, your family. Are you a single child? Do you have siblings, or are you coming from a line of attorneys? Or
so definitely not coming from a line of attorneys. The first attorney in my family I have an older brother. We're pretty close in age. He is 15 months older than I am. So, we grew up really close, did a lot together growing up. I mean, I grew up on a farm out in the back mountain. My grandfather had Angus cows and honeybees that we worked on the apiary in the summer. And, we'd bale hay in the summer for the cows, stacking it in the barn, working out on the wagon all day. I have a lot of great memories from doing that stuff growing up. And it definitely taught me about work ethic. Being a farmer, you can't necessarily pick and choose what days you want to work and what days you don't want to work. You have to show up every day for the animals and ensure that they're getting what they need. But also sometimes you're at the mercy of what the weather is and what's going on around you in the natural world. So
What made you want to become a nurse first?
So when I was graduating high school and considering what I was going to do, I was looking at potentially doing pharmacy or something in the medical realm. When I went for orientation, I went to Wilkes University, and when I went for orientation, I got to talking with the counselor a little bit, and, she kind of sold me on nursing and the fact that, I like to talk with people, interact with people. And I feel like you get a little bit more of people's stories as a nurse at the bedside than I would working in a pharmacy. And you still get that stuff as a pharmacist, especially if you're a clinical pharmacist working in the hospital and whatnot, but you don't necessarily develop those intimate relationships with people and get to know who they are and what's really going on with them and why they're in the hospital and all of that stuff. I really appreciated that personal touch of nursing and decided to give it a try and went through the nursing program and got my license.
All right. And so from there, then you decided, hey, I'm going to go back and become an attorney now. What prompted that thought?
So as I had mentioned earlier, working at the bedside, you feel constrained a lot of times on what you can do and what you're allowed to do at the bedside. And sometimes you feel as though what you're doing may not be best for the patient. There's a lot of resistance to change sometimes, but like I had mentioned, regulations kind of develop where the change goes and what gets implemented within the hospital system. And I just felt like I wanted to do something where I could use my skills, but at the same time have a more immediate effect on people's lives too. So I got to thinking about different avenues, looked at consulting work, and ended up going into the legal field.
It's interesting. Did you say you have siblings?
Yeah, so I have a brother, Sam. He currently works as a store manager for Lowe's. So he's been working for Lowe's for quite a few years. And when he was in high school, he actually got a job working as a cashier with them and has continued with Lowe's since that time. So I think he's been with them. It'll be right around 20 years this year that he's worked with Lowe's.
It's interesting. Your story is so similar to mine in a sense that I'm also the first lawyer and went through the medical and came through to the law. It's funny listening to you. It's just such a similar story. My brother's in IT, so I am also the only attorney.
Going from medical to legal, I feel like there's so much overlap between the two. If you're independently in one field or the other, it's not as visible, but working in both fields, you kind of see the great intersect between them. Like I had mentioned about the regulations kind of dictating what happens in the medical world, but also in the legal world, your case and case development is dependent on your client's injuries, their treatment, what they're going through, and understanding both fields helps with not only getting them to the right providers and right treaters, but also understanding the frustrations of one field and the frustrations of another. So, with something as far as scheduling, if you have scheduling issues with your clients who need treatment, how to put them in touch with the right person to ensure that they get scheduled when they need to for appointments, or obtaining medical records, what's the best avenue to obtain the medical records, and ensure that you're getting all of the information you need in the medical records, ensuring that you're obtaining all of the records that are available, those types of things. And, looking at your general auto case, a lot of the times there's ambulance records that are available. There's the ED records that are available. There's the follow-up treatment with the family physician, and just having a basic understanding of what the treatment course usually looks like and who they're treating with.
Yeah.
You don't miss records or overlook records. You're able to find all of those things and get everything you need and have the complete story.
Absolutely. And just to go back to your regulations thing, I think that also plays a role in your case because that's the standard, right? That they're held to. Usually is the regulation.
Yeah. And there could be, that's where specialties come in, and the expert specialties is some of those standards, some things are dictated by statute, but also in specific fields of practice, providers in what they do in that field specifically kind of sets a different standard. So, like I had mentioned earlier about the family physician treating the neck pain, if you're going to a family physician versus a neurologist, the standard of care for those two individuals is going to be completely different just because they have individualized bodies of knowledge related to it. So, one may order a CT scan while the other one may order an MRI, because typically by the time they get to the other one, there is a CT scan, or they know that a CT scan won't show X, Y, or Z as to what they're looking for. So,
Right. So how about now? Any more farming for you? Do you have animals in your
yeah,
life?
I do. My son and daughter help me out a great deal with them. And I think I drive my wife crazy with having the animals on the farm. But currently, we do have some chickens that we keep for eggs. In this spring, I got some ducks, not necessarily keeping them for eggs, but now we've built a coop specifically for the ducks. They're staying on the farm and laying eggs for us as well. So
That's great. I'm looking to try and do that as well. The chickens and the ducks for sure. Hopefully some goats someday too.
what about that one? I think rather.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think this was really great. How would you let our viewers know? How can they reach you? Share your contact information?
Sure, absolutely. So, if you're looking to get in contact with me, easiest way would be to call the office here at O'Donnell Law Offices, 570-821-5717. I'm also available via email. My email is joshua@o'donnell-law.com, JOSHUA, the @ symbol ODONNELL-LAW.com.
All right, great. So that was great. Thank you again, Josh, for coming on the show. I'm sure our listeners are going to love this conversation and the tips that you've given. And again, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy. I appreciate the opportunity and providing some information.
Great.
Statutes and Stethoscopes podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.